right, here we are, episode 9 of Merriwether's World. Wow, 9 hours of free knowledge given to you, free. All right, as usual, we have me and Merriwether helping on the keyboard, answering your questions and that sort of thing. Tonight we are going to start discussing all the wonderful wild weeds that are popping up in your yard and around town. Many of them are edible. It's kind of interesting. I get a lot of questions from Texans saying, hey, it's winter. Is there anything worth foraging right now? And the answer is absolutely yes, because pretty much everything you read in the foraging books by people up north are now available down south in the winter. Most of the edible summertime weeds up in the northern climes, when I say northern climes, I basically mean anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line, turn into wintertime weeds down here in Texas. So there's lots of good stuff out there. A few other things. Tonight's sponsors, we have two. One is AlternativeHouston.com, and the other is Scout and Cellar, particularly the sliding alder wines. Both of these are for people who like to do something other than just watch TV. Alternative Houston, if you are looking for something fun and funky to do in Houston, every day you go to Alternative Houston and see what's up. Everything from music to comedy to circus performing, training. It's amazing what Houston has to offer. Or if you're the type of person that doesn't want to hang out with 1,000 of your closest friends, you just want to sit home and sip wine, then Scout and Cellar through the sliding alder wines is the person you want to talk to, and just kind of sit there and sip your drink. Okay, lots going on. So, like I said, tonight is about edible weeds. And if I can cut over to the book, normally I have a bunch of books that I recommend. But tonight, all I'm really going to suggest is the Golden Guide to Weeds from St. Martin's Press. So this book, if you open it up and show the inside, a lot of how I laid out the Idiot's Guide to Foraging, show actual inside. So it shows the seeds, the flower, the plant, yeah, even show more. Go like to the center of the book. Okay, so Quackgrass, and lift it up higher, please. So one of the things it shows is maps of where in North America those weeds are found. It does not, however, tell you if the weed is edible or what time of the year the weed is found. This is written up in the north, so they assume everything is summertime weed, so May through September. When in reality, most of these weeds, once you get south, turn into winter weeds. Like I said, they don't show if the plant is edible, but at least it'll help you identify the plant. So then you can go, say, to foragingtexas.com to see if it's edible. All right. So without further ado, or, well, I guess I wouldn't say without further babble from me, because that's pretty much what all this show is, let us jump to the presentation, Winter Weeds of Texas. So, like I said, our sponsor, Alternative Houston, if you want to go out and party with a bunch of people, they are the people you want to check to see what's going on. Or if you just want to hang out and sip your wine, sliding alder wines is the people to go to. They have a wine delivery service. You can order the wine and it will show up in an insulated, unmarked container to your doorstep. You can buy complete sets, or you can buy individual bottles of wine. One of the really cool things about this is they are all what are considered to be clean crafted wines. No extra sugar, no extra chemicals, just yeast, water, fruit, and love. Okay, so a word to all you gardeners out there, y'all work too hard. I don't know why you put a lot of effort into growing food, because if you just kind of sit back and let your yard go a little wild, you end up with lots and lots of food. Sometimes your homeowners association may frown upon this, but usually if you can keep it to the backyard, there's not a lot of problem going on there. So Let's start with bastard cabbage. This is more prevalent right now in the hill country area, but I was driving up that way a week ago, and the fields and road ditches and everything were filled with this big yellow plant. And if you look at the flower, excuse me, you may, or sorry, the unopened flower buds, they may seem somewhat familiar to you. They kind of look like broccoli, don't they? They are in the same family as broccoli, the brassica, or the mustard family. So there's lots of things you can do with it. The young leaves in particular are good raw. Cooked, they get a little strong flavor, so you don't need much to really bring out a kind of a horseradishy, mustardy sort of flavor to your foods. The stem can also be eaten raw. I'm the type of person that really loves the stem of broccoli, and the bastard cabbage kind of reminds me of that. The root, if you dig it up, it has a nice tap root. So, imagine a carrot or a horseradish, and it's always hard to do this. Carrot or a horseradish sort of root, and that is what is going to have with the bastard cabbage. If you start shredding it and peeling it, it develops a strong mustard, horseradishy sort of scent that you can then use as a seasoning. My particular favorite part, though, are the flowers and unopened flower buds. Again, I will just eat them raw off the plant. They're a bit strong, but they're like broccoli with attitude. Basically broccoli for cavemen and cavewomen. That's what you're, if that's what you're after, your paleo diet, that's a good thing to be going with. As far as mimics go, the brassica family in general is pretty easy to identify, especially from the flowers. The flowers are 4 petals with an X or kind of an H shape. And then the stamen, it has 6 stamen inside. But there's other things there, but this is basically just to start you out on what you might be seeing. Like I said, if you're driving anywhere from Houston up through the hill country, this is most likely the clusters of yellow flowers that you're seeing on the side of the road. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions?
Not so far.
All right, that gives me a chance to. Okay, another plant in the brassica or mustard family right now is the hairy bittercress, or just bittercress. This is a wonderfully delicious little plant. You will mainly find it in cool, wet flower beds and in shaded areas. It started showing up over a month ago, really, but it will continue on all through winter. This, like I said, is in the mustard family, so if you crush up the leaves, you will get that horseradish sort of smell. Now, the smell does not appear instantly. That scent, that horseradish smell, is actually, how do I want to say this? The molecule responsible for it is not in the plant, but the precursor for the molecule for that horseradish scent is in the plant. So when you crush up the leaves, say by chewing it, that molecule, that particular molecule, combines with oxygen and water and turns into the horseradishy flavor sort of thing. So you're doing chemistry in your mouth. So cool that. Parts of it that are edible, pretty much everything. The leaves are good raw, the stem, the flowers, the seed pods. Basically, if it's green or white or tender, it is good to eat. It's particularly good on sandwiches, like roast beef sandwiches or some pastrami, wherever you would put horseradish. I'm still trying to convince certain family members that we should mix it into mayonnaise and put it on deviled eggs for a potluck. But, well, a lot of people don't like me bringing homemade food to potlucks anymore. It's a cricket incident. We won't go into details. This is really a cool weather plant. So when the temperature starts dropping, even in this, below 70s at night, it will start showing up and grow until the hot weather appears again. It's kind of a cool plant too. If you see these kind of sticks at the top surrounding the white flower, those are the seed pods. And when they dry, they get under tension, and then when you touch them, they pop open and fling the seeds all over the place. So they expel the seeds up to like 14 inches. Now, this is a plant that when I'm at, say, a nursery or a garden center, and they have some 50-cent plants on clearance because the plants are almost dead and they happen to have this weed in the pot, I will buy this is worth 50 cents to me. This is worth like 99 cents to me. As I like to grow this on my windowsill. Inside the house, these plants will grow all year round. The issue, remember how I mentioned the flinging the seeds bit? So if you start with one small pot of these, eventually all the potted plants around it will also have the bittercress growing in it because the seeds have flung and landed in there. As far as mimics go, again, this is always tricky, but in my opinion, there's really nothing once you look at the bittercress over on, say, forageandtexas.com and look at the guidelines for identifying it. There really isn't anything else that looks like it and grows in those locations at that time of year. Okay, any questions?
Not so far.
Still no questions. All right. Moving on. Carolina bristle mallow. This is a kind of an interesting plant. It grows creeping along the ground, and everywhere that the stem touches the ground, it puts down roots. The leaves are very bristly and rough. They almost remind me of a cat's tongue. This plant is actually available all year round. So it's not just a wintertime plant, but you can eat it, really anytime you find it. The leaves are used as a tea. The tea has kind of I'll warn you, the large amounts of the tea can trigger sweating. During the summer, it's used as a cooling tea. So if you're going to be out doing a lot of hard work out in the cold, it's recommended that you don't drink the Carolina bristle mallow tea, just because you will sweat more and your clothes will get damp. And then when you stop doing hard stuff, then you will cool down even more. And if you're wearing cotton kills. So this is an indoor sitting by the fireplace, just kind of chilling tea. And hot, it will make you feel nice and warm. The flowers also are used in a tea. And the flowers are those kind of salmon colored things going on there that look like a flower. Directly to the, I guess that would be the left and down to it, there's this weird hairy round thing with kind of a 5-pointed star around it. That is the fruit of the Carolina bristle mallow. And that you can just eat raw. I'll just pop them off and eat them as is. You can also throw them in whatever you're cooking if you want to put these weird starfishy looking things in your food. But really, the Carolina bristle mallow, you find this in disturbed areas. It likes to grow like on dirt roads that aren't used much, or right along dirt paths. Places where most plants get trampled, this Carolina bristle mallow is actually pretty tough and resistant to that. Now, there is a mimic that you need to watch out for called creeping buttercup. And if I'm, yes, good. Okay, so creeping buttercup looks very similar. The leaves, instead of being bristly, are actually shiny and almost plastically looking, but they have the same shape and size. The creeping buttercup, like the name says, likes to creep along the ground, very similar to the Carolina bristle mallow. But the creeping buttercup only puts roots down at the center. It has a center taproot, and then the vines kind of grow from it and don't put roots down beyond that. And then the flower, it is a 5-petaled flower, but it is yellow rather than that kind of orange salmon pink color. The creeping buttercup, if you eat it raw, fresh, it has a very bitter flavor, so most people don't eat it. But if it is dried and eaten, it has this unfortunate effect that makes you hyper photosensitive. I joke in the classes that the creeping buttercup makes you or turns you into a redhead, because if you eat this, the poisons in it will trigger a reaction in your skin if you go out in the sun, and you will immediately start to blister and burn. I have a redheaded brother, true brother, not stepbrother, true brother, and he just can't handle the sun. He burns very quickly, so that's where the whole creeping buttercup, it turns you into a redhead thing comes from. But this is something you don't want to eat, don't want to mistake it for the Carolina bristle mallow. And there's a number of winter plants that look like the creeping buttercup, so we'll be talking about this again and again. All right, any questions?
Nope.
No questions. Wow. I must be an excellent teacher. Okay, yeah. All right, cat's ear. This is one of the many dandelion mimics that shows up during the winter months. Cat's ear, for the most part, it looks like a dandelion, especially the flower. Some of the differences, though, is it does put multiple flowers per stalk, whereas a true dandelion only puts one flower per stalk. And also the edges of the leaves have a hairy appearance. If you think about the ear of a cat, how it has the little hairs sticking out the edge, that's what kind of goes on with the cat's ear plant. If you were able to look very closely at the edge of the flowers, you would see, at the edge of the leaves, you would see those little hairs like the ear of a cat. The leaves are good raw. You can cook them or you can ferment them in a kimchi sort of thing. Now, the cat's ear, like I said, it is in the same family as the dandelion, and so it is considered one of the bitter greens. So as far as dealing with the bitter greens, there are 4 different techniques that I recommend. One of them I don't really recommend, but it's a possible way of dealing with the bitterness. And the first one is boiling. And this is the one I don't like because, yeah, you can boil the leaves and it will remove a lot of the bitter compounds, but it'll also remove a lot of the water-soluble compounds and minerals, vitamins and minerals, and turns the thing into just this green mush. And really, to get the minerals, you would have to drink the water from it, and it's going to taste bitter. So you really haven't achieved anything. So while boiling does remove the bitterness, it removes a lot of other goodness too. My personal favorite way of dealing with the cat's ear is wilting it with hot bacon grease. So you pour hot bacon grease over the leaves, and that causes them to shrivel up. You may have had a wilted salad somewhere, or a wilted endive is very commonly used in that manner. But by the hot grease, the heat drives some of the bitterness away, and also the grease kind of coats your tongue so you don't taste the bitterness. So, you taste bacon flavor. Now, the third way is mix it with something bland. So if you take the leaves and chop them up and add them to other bland greens, iceberg lettuce, wild violet, actually bittercress. It's not so much bland, but it has that horseradishy flavor, but you dilute that bitterness. And then the fourth way is mix it with something sour. The tongue has a hard time tasting sour and bitter at the same time. So if you use something sour, it kind of cancels out the bitterness. So those are the best ways of dealing with any of the bitter greens that we'll see tonight. Now, the root, if you're familiar with dandelion roots, they have all sorts of medicinal properties. The cat's ear doesn't have that much. It still has a decent flavor, so for a tea or pickling it. If you want to pickle it, use the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving, which I actually didn't put a link to. But the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving pickled okra recipe is a really good source of, it has just a dill and salt and sugar and vinegar. So it's a real simple beginner level recipe for pickling things, and a lot of things pickled in it taste really, really, really good. So the cat's ear is among them. Now, if you see in this picture, it looks like the cat's ear leaves are growing upright, and that's what it does if the location where it's at isn't mowed. But if we go back one, the cat's ear has this interesting thing where it starts growing its leaves up, but if it gets mowed a few times, it realizes, wait, up is bad, and it grows its leaves flat on the ground, so they no longer stick up where the lawnmower can get. So if you see what looks like a dandelion leaf but flat against the ground, it's very likely the cat's ear. Okay, do we have a question? Oh, we have a question. All right, a question.
All right, so Mrs. Kayleen asks, what yummy, raw, different flavor would you recommend looking for here in the hill country this time of year? Along the river, specifically.
Okay, actually, we're going to talk about some of those. All the ones that we're seeing today can be found up in the hill country, and there are a few that will be I should say, what we're seeing today and in the next few weeks, because it's going to take a while to get through all these. But one in particular that you have up there that isn't down in the East Texas or Gulf Coast region is a plant called Filary, and that is on this presentation. It's in the F, but it's Filaree, Filary. You can find it on the Foraging Texas website. And it's an interesting spinach substitute, and it's a very cool looking plant. So it jazzes up your food. But yeah, so be patient. We'll get to it, and we will continue on here with chickweed. If you look closely around cool, damp areas again, especially along the edges of buildings and fences, you're very likely going to find this plant, because it's already started popping up. Now, chickweed, the leaves, the stem, the flowers, really all parts of it above ground are edible. It makes a wonderful addition to salads. It is not bitter, so it's a really good source of diluting the bitter greens. It's also really good in smoothies, and why it's good in smoothies as opposed to a lot of other weeds are good. I should say it's absolutely great in smoothies because chickweed has a slight creaminess to it, and so if you make add chickweed to a smoothie, it's the difference between a slushy and a milkshake almost. The smoothie gets even more creamy and a really cool texture and very soothing just to drink. So the chickweed smoothies are really something you should try if you're into smoothies. Now, if you can see, someday I should look up and to see how you all are watching this. I'm hoping you're sitting at computers or something with a big screen, so you can see kind of the details on the pictures. If not, I'm going to have to change the way I do things. But chickweed, I want to draw your attention to some very specific features to help you identify it. First, if you can look at the stem, and I'm pointing to the stem, but if you look on the bottom of the stem, there's this weird kind of white line that runs up one side of the stem, but then when you get above where the leaves are and it turns kind of red, you see the line is on the other side. Chickweed has some really good ways of identifying it because it has some very unique structures that no one else does. So that weird white line running along the stem, it's a single line of hairs that run along the stem until it gets to where leaves are. So let's say my hand is where the leaves are. So we're running up, and then when it gets beyond that point, so now we'll say it's here, it switches sides. So that single line of hair will run up one side of the chickweed until it gets to a junction where the leaves are, and then it'll jump over to the other side and run up there and then jump back. So this line of hair zigzags up the stem between the leaf nodes. So there's no other plant that does that. So you may need a magnifying glass to see it if your eyes are getting kind of hard at the vision, but it's there, and that's one of the keys for identifying it. The other, if you look at the white petal there in the upper right-hand location, it looks like it has 10 petals. It actually only has 5 petals, but the petals are so deeply cleft that they look like 2 separate petals. So the 5 petals look like 10 petals. Again, this is a job for a magnifying glass usually, but if you look really, really closely at the chickweed, you will see that. As far as mimics go, there are 2. One that people mistake for a lot is the Scarlet Pimpernel, which is on the left there. The Scarlet Pimpernel is kind of unique because usually it will have kind of those orange flowers, but sometimes it will also have blue flowers on the same plant. But if you notice, it does not have white flowers. It does have 5 petals, but they're not deeply cleft. And if you were to look very, very closely at the stem, there would be no hairs running in a single file up and then switching sides. So that is the Scarlet Pimpernel. The size-wise and location is very similar. It likes to grow around where chickweed grows, but it is not a chickweed. It has a bitter flavor. It's not necessarily poisonous, but it's not all that tasty. Now, the other one that is commonly mistaken for chickweed is called horse herb, also known as straggler daisy, and it has yellow flowers. This is a rough, tough plant that you'll find growing just about all year round in most places in Texas. It doesn't have any poison, but it also doesn't have any nutritional value for humans. So if you accidentally get some horse herb in your food, just imagine you just ate a brown paper bag. It'll give you some fiber, but no toxicity, no poisons. But again, the leaves are roughly the same size and shape as chickweed, and it grows on the ground, but it has the yellow flower, and it does not have this single line of hairs. Ooh, a question. I love the questions.
Alright, so the question is, does chickweed, have the white hairline all year long?
Good question, yes. When the chickweed is particularly young, when it's still a little bitty itty plant, it's really, really, really hard to see those hairs. But as it gets older and longer, the distance between the leaves actually gets fairly large. And so you will see that hair there. So it's always there, but it's not always easy to see. Okay. Oops. Okay, cleavers. This is a really cool one. I like cleavers a lot. Another name for this is Velcro weed. This is that weird sticky plant that sticks to you, your pets, your goats, your, everything. It runs in a long, almost like a vine, and it has a whorled leaf pattern where it usually will have anywhere from 5 to 7 leaves in a circular pattern around the stem. When it's young, the leaves will be a little round like my thumb, but then as they mature, they get long like my finger. It has a little white flower, 4 petals, but by the time the flower starts appearing, you're getting close to the end of the cleaver's life. Now, like I said, you may know it as Velcro weed or sticky weed. It's also known as bedstraw. It's an interesting plant because it is absolutely loaded with vitamin C. Now, you don't want to eat this plant. If you eat this plant, especially raw, when it's in its sticky stage, it will actually cling to your throat, and someone will have to go in with the forceps and pull it out of your throat. This is an unpleasant situation. It's never happened to me, but there are rumors in the foraging world that, students, I shouldn't use the word patients, students have, grabbed some and eaten them, and it's like, okay, now we got a choking thing on here. Now, what you do with cleavers is you make a tea from it. So you can just crush it up. And I usually, when I'm out, I'll usually just take the green plant, crush it up, twist it up because you want to rupture that cell wall, and then boil it for 10 minutes. And you end up with a lovely emerald green tea that's really loaded with vitamin C. And it has just kind of a mild herbal flavor. But it's really good, especially in a cold winter day out in the woods. Where you find this is normally in border areas, like along fences or along the borders between fields and woods. It's going to be rare in the deep woods. It likes some sunshine. But look for it in kind of disturbed areas, clearings, along stream banks, places like that. It doesn't necessarily need water, but it likes the sunlight, especially during the winter. Now, when the cleavers are really, really young, when they're only about 1 inch long, which is pretty much already past from what I've been seeing, and they don't have any stickiness, those you can eat raw, and they actually taste like peas, like the snow peas. They're really tasty. But once they get any stickiness, you really are limited to making a tea out of it. Now, one other thing you can do with it, not eat it or drink it, but in Boy Scouts, we called the cleavers the backpacker colander because it grows in big, thick mats. And if we were out doing, some Boy Scout camp and wanted to strain something, like pasta or, after we've been boiling it, we would actually take a huge clump of it, kind of make a bowl out of it, put it over the top of the pot and very carefully strain our food through that. As it works, it sticks together, it forms a nice mesh. It's almost like nature's cheesecloth. And so it would just help strain out our pasta for our food. So who wants to carry a colander with them in the woods if there's cleavers around? Another thing, interesting little side note, because I love fascinating facts about plants. Cleavers, for a long time, and I don't know if they still are, but for a long time, they were listed on the ingredients of Snapple iced tea. If you got a bottle of Snapple with the multiple flavors, you'd read through the ingredients. One of the ingredients was cleavers. I'm assuming they used it as an easy way of increasing the vitamin C content, increasing the health benefits of the tea. I haven't bought any iced tea in a long time, so I don't know if they still do. But I know Snapple itself kind of disappeared for a while. They seem to be back, but they're not a sponsor, so we'll stop talking about them. Oh, we have a question.
Got a question about cleavers. Someone asks, what is the best way to put cleavers up?
Best way to put cleavers up. I'm assuming you mean to dry them. The easiest thing is just get a bundle about the size of the paper, the tube from a roll of paper towels, and kind of stick them together, tie a string around the top, and just hang them up somewhere to air dry. Remember, I'm a big fan of allowing plants, especially plants I'm going to turn into tea, to air dry, because that allows a particular enzyme in the plant that gets triggered when it dies to start putting holes through the cell wall so that the vitamin C and so forth can get out. But at the same time, it starts to break down some of the chlorophyll, which traditionally can add a slight bitterness to the tea. So the drying, it opens up the cell wall so the good stuff can get out, but the bad things like chlorophyll still remain trapped in the plant. Now, if you put it in a dehydrator, you will dry it, but you may not necessarily get those holes that the enzymes want to chew through the cell wall, because you've taken out all the moisture and it needs that water to do that. So then when you put the plant in hot water, you're not going to get as much flavor or vitamin C or minerals or whatever, because they're still trapped inside that cell wall. Any others?
No questions so far.
Wow. Is there something going on tonight? Oops. Okay, next. Corn salad. This is an interesting plant. This is actually not a native plant. It is from France, where it is used as a garden vegetable. It is a very fast-growing plant. It loves loose, sandy soil. In France, like I said, it's used as it's raised in gardens, kind of like spinach. And for some reason, it went feral in Texas, and it really likes the sandy soils. I find a lot of this right at the junction of the Gulf Coast and Gulf Coast region, heading into the East Texas piney woods sort of area, and then also up towards Waco. I'm not sure if it does well up in the hill country, up in Austin. The soil, it does like very well-drained sandy soil. So it really depends on how much rock you have and how close that rock is to the surface. It might do well there, but I'm guessing the soil up in the hill country may not be quite right. So this is traditionally a garden vegetable. It was used in salads, used raw. It was also cooked. Now it has kind of a indistinct sort of appearance to it. It has these big club-shaped leaves. Let me go back one. Its main claim to fame, to help you identify it, is it grows in a fractal pattern. So it has a stem, and then that stem will split into two, and then those two will split into two, and then those two will split into two, and then it'll usually flower. So the stem splits and splits and splits. Also, if you look closely, the leaves at the stems right below the split and at the split, the leaves actually grow around the stem. So it looks like one big leaf that the stem has grown through, rather than two individual leaves growing across from each other. So the leaves kind of fuse around the stem. Any question? Okay. But a really good plant, a really nice, mild, light, kind of like a diet spinach sort of thing. Not diet in like carbohydrates, but just a nice, light, pleasant flavor and texture. It's a good plant. There's a lot of it around if you know where to look. One thing I recommend, if you do find it, don't pick all of it, because you want a lot of it to go to seed. This is one of the plants that I consider it uncommon to rare in Texas. So if you go to www.foragingetexas and look at the 200 and some plants on there, you will see each has an abundance code. Is it invasive? Is it plentiful? Is it common? Is it uncommon? Is it rare? Is it endangered? And that abundance code helps guide you as to how much of it you should pick. With the invasive, like I said, you pick it all. Let's strip it, bare. If it's plentiful, it's like a lot of the weeds. You can take 80% of it, and 2 days later it will all be back. When it's common, that's when you start dialing back some. That's like take 20% of the plant. If it's uncommon, you go and take 10% of the plant. If it's rare, get a selfie with it, and don't actually eat it until the zombies come and you don't have any other food. And if it's endangered, I ask that you send me a coordinates of it, because I am building a database of endangered plants in Texas. Okay, so corn salad, it's a nice cool weather plant. Really, when the temperatures are in the 50s and 60s is where it starts popping up. It doesn't last long. It's pretty fast growing, so you got to catch it. But the nice thing about it is if you harvest it in a sustainable manner, just take 10% of it, it will be there year after year after year. Ooh, a question.
Got a question. They ask, can you find corn salad in the Houston area or north of Houston?
Can you find it? Well, let's go to me. Can you find it in the Houston area or north of Houston? Yes. Here's the thing. The boulevards, the green areas between the roads in the woodlands are, the town, the woodlands, are loaded with this stuff, which is immensely frustrating to me because I really, really, really want to eat it. But A, it's on public property where I don't have, still trying to figure this out. So it's on public property where I don't have permission to eat it. And B, it's right along the roadside, which generally is not really a good place to harvest things. But yeah, it does absolutely wonderful in the Woodlands, Conroe sort of area, up into Huntsville. I've seen it up at the Renaissance Festival. Ooh, yeah, the big swings by the jousting arena. There's a lot of corn salad that grows around there. So yeah, it does really well in that area.
Another question about corn salad. She asked, what does the underside of the leaf look like?
Good question, because its mimic is cudweed. The corn salad, the underside of the leaf is just as green as the top side. If you flip the leaf over and it is white or gray, it is a mimic called cudweed, which we will talk about later on in the presentation, because again, cudweed is like creeping buttercup. There's a lot of things that look like cudweed. But the corn salad itself, it's going to be a very smooth plant, no hair, no fuzz. And if you flip the leaf over, it's just as green on the bottom as it is on the top. So there's a good chance if you're asking about this, because you have in your mind a weed with a white or gray underside, that is cudweed.
All right, last question.
Yes, sir.
What is the best way to harvest the seeds in order to plant the plant? So not just harvesting alongside the road.
Okay. That is something I have not mastered yet. So after the flowers, you get the seeds. They form little seed pods. Really, what I recommend, if you can do it, if you find it in a place where you're allowed to harvest it, is actually dig it up, fill in the hole, plant it in your yard or wherever where you want it, and just let it be and let it drop its own seeds. Now, the other thing, though, is since this is a vegetable, it's, was in France, but you can buy the seeds for the corn salad here in the United States from Amazon and other seed companies. Oh, I should have put that on here. A lot of times, instead of being called corn salad, it's called maki. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's M-A-C-H-E, maki. or match. I don't speak French. I speak English and Minnesotan and Texan. So, but yeah, the corn salad, if you look up seeds online for corn salad or MACHE, those will be the seeds. And you just want to plant those in like September or, at the very, very beginning of October at the latest in loose, sandy, well-drained soil, and then sit back. Okay. Corn salad. All right, let's just another word to our sponsor because we're already 40 minutes into this. Alternative Houston, like I said, they are, if you want to hang out with 1,000 really awesome, fun people, Alternative Houston will tell you all the places in Houston you can find cool, fun people hanging out doing cool, fun things. One of the things they post, well, every day they post a list of what's going on that day. And about once a week, there's a location that offers free circus classes where you can learn circus skills, which just to me, when I grow up, I want to work for a circus. The other thing that they'll often list on the alternativehouston.com is stand-up comedy or improvisational comedy classes teaching you to be funny at the spur of the moment, which truly is a very important life skill. And then, of course, Sliding Alder Wines, part of the Scout and Cellar Clean Wine group. I will say, so the Sliding Alder Wines, the link, the owner of this is a person I knew since kindergarten, Doreen Leppa, an absolutely awesome, awesome person. I love her to death. I wanted to show a picture of the two of us back in kindergarten, but I figured she would kill me if I did that. And plus, all it is like some cave paintings of stick people, and it's really hard to see the details and just see what a cutie she was and what a, well, actually, I still kind of look like the caveman there. But anyway, the Sliding Alder Wines, and especially they got a Thanksgiving special. So if you want some what's called clean crafted wines, like I said, water, yeast, fruit, and love. No chemicals, no extra sugar, no preservatives. Shipped to your door in an insulated box. It's a great source of wine. Okay, moving on. Cucumber weed. The picture on the left-hand side here, the little bitty ones along the white pipe, this one kind of kills me because this is taken outside my office at work in the middle of a chemical plant, and so which is an absolutely terrible place to harvest plants. But they have this huge mat of the cucumber weed, which is absolutely delicious. Well, cucumber weed in general is delicious. I don't know how the ones growing in the chemical plant taste because even I'm not that stupid. But from the name, you can kind of guess the flavor. This plant has a wonderful cucumber flavor. So you would throw it in your salads and people go, hey, where are the cucumbers? And you go, haha, I got you. It's the little leafy things there. Now, right now, this time of year, they're very small with little diamond-shaped fuzzy leaves. But as it grows through the winter, the leaves actually become fairly large. Basically that long. It's like 2 inches long. The trick when you're identifying it, if you can look closely, so it has alternating leaves, they zigzag up. At the base of each leaf, there will be a kind of an odd-looking flower cluster. But the key thing you need to look at is the edges of the leaf. There are no teeth on it. The reason being is there is a poisonous mimic to the cucumber weed called the Acalypha species. There's a number of them there. It has that same alternating leaf pattern. The leaves are diamond-shaped. So they kind of have the shape that the young cucumber weed has. They don't get as long, but if you see, they have the teeth on there. So you don't want this one. It won't kill you, but it's really not good for you either. So you want the cucumber weed, the true cucumber weed, with the smooth edges, no teeth like the other one saw, and a nice long elongated leaf. It's great raw. You can cook it, but I really don't understand why anyone would cook it, because how often do you cook cucumbers? So just eat it raw and enjoy the cucumber flavor without the cucumber effort. Sure, I like cucumbers. Yeah. Oh, like putting it on your eyes to like relax your eyes, or why ever people put cucumbers on their eyes, it does nothing for that. So you can stick to cucumbers for the eye thing. But remember, cucumber weed, look for it in kind of shady, wet areas again. It's very, very prevalent. I know this is also up in the hill country quite a bit. I see a lot of it up, you head up by past Llano and Blanco and Fredericksburg and up there, up towards Enchanted Rock. There's lots of this up there right now. Okay, and then the mimic, remember the mimic has teeth. Okay, curled dock. This is an excellent plant right now, and right now we're right at the best time to eat it. It's just coming out of the ground. Oops, well, it's just coming out of the ground and the leaves are still small. For lots and lots of pictures and information on how to help identify it, again, go to the www.foragingtexas.com. Look under the curled dock. But basically it has these big elongated leaves and the edges are kind of wavy and scrolled in, hence the curled. And when they first come out of the ground, the leaves are rolled up like a scroll. So as it grows, the leaves unfurl as they grow. And when the leaves are still really young and the edges are curled in like that, they're absolutely delicious. They have a nice tangy, sort of lemony flavor, very similar to wood sorrel. Hopefully you've tasted wood sorrel. If not, that'll be coming later on in the presentation. But a really, really nice, tangy, lemony sort of flavor. When they're small, you just eat them raw. And then as they get bigger, like they're shown in the picture here, those I will cook after taking the vein out, the center vein out, because it can be kind of stringy and tough. But the leaves, when they're still, like under 10 inches long, they're still usually pretty good. Taste the nibble off one. If it's starting to get bitter or chalky or stringy, then don't bother. Now in late winter, it will have, well, let me jump forward one. So it'll form this big mass of leafy plants and it'll have a spike coming up. And at the spike, there'll be all these little bumps on there. The bumps are only about the size of the eraser from a pencil. And there'll be leaves spread in with them. But that's the flower and the seed pods. And if you let those, they turn, whoops, brown, kind of a rust brown color. And you'll see these brown spikes sticking up in fields. That's where they like to grow. They like full sun. They like cow fields and horse fields and just fields in general. Big open area. Ditches too, but they don't like growing in shade. They like the full winter sun. So you'll see these brown spikes. And each one of those little bumps on there has 3 seeds in it. So you get a lot of protein from this at this point. So again, looking at the right-hand picture, when the spikes growing up are a rusty brown color, you take those and kind of run your hand off it and collect all the little seed pods that are growing on that spike. Now, each pod is very small. It's going to be maybe total the size of a kernel of popcorn. And most of that is husk. So most of that is fiber with 3 little seeds. So it's very highly recommended that you separate the seeds from the husk. Otherwise, it's giving yourself a really huge dose of fiber with all the associated exit strategy that huge doses of fiber produce. I find the easiest way of separating the seeds from the husk is get yourself a big, like a wok or some big frying pan and throw several handfuls of the seeds in there and stir them around and heat them. What this does, it'll roast it a little and it'll make that husk very, very brittle. Then pour the seeds after toasting them just a few minutes into a bowl and start taking handfuls and rubbing it between your hands. And this will break the husk away from the seeds and everything falls back into the bowl, unless you have a light breeze blowing. So then the seeds are much denser than the husk. So if you have a light breeze or do it outside with a fan, don't do it inside with a fan. But you want just kind of a gentle breeze, enough so that as you are kind of grinding the husk and seeds between your hands, the husk will fall and blow away, but the seeds being heavier will fall back into the bowl. And so you don't have to get all the husks away, but you want to get, a good 80 or 90% of the curled dock seed husks away from the seeds, just to avoid any serious fiber issues. Like I said, it'll make you go poop. The seeds, you can eat them raw. They're really good that way. You can, after roasting them, they grind into a flour. That's pretty well. You can boil them into a porridge. One thing I like doing, I don't even remember, someone taught me this, one of the other foragers, and I feel bad that I don't remember who, but a mixture of roasted curled dock seeds mixed with cream cheese on a Ritz cracker is really, really good, or any sort of cracker, really, or bagel or anything. It's like a seedy cream cheese thing going on. Really, really, really tasty. Okay, and as far as mimics go, there's really nothing else that looks like the curled dock. Okay, ooh, we got a question.
We got several questions, actually. So does cucumber weed grow in East Texas?
Let's go back to the presentation. Oops. Yes, cucumber weed does grow in East Texas. I've seen it out in Village Creek in that area, up along the Big Thicket, the Turkey Trail through the Big Thicket. The main thing is just kind of shady and moist, but not completely overgrown. Think of this as you're more likely to find it at border areas, especially where fields meet wood or water meets wood. It likes to have some shade, some protection. But yeah, you can find it up in the East Texas area.
Okay. Will cucumber weed make you belch like cucumber does?
I don't think so. It doesn't have some of the components that are a microbiotic. To my knowledge, I haven't seen anything where it feeds the gut bacteria that produces gas like cucumbers do, that then result in the burping. If you do burp, it would taste like cucumbers, which is tasty.
Okay, and then a last question. What happens if or when you mix various flowers? For example, the greenbrier with the curled dock with nut flower, would they blend well?
That is an excellent question. So if you are collecting seeds and plants for flower, getting enough seeds from any one plant to produce enough flower to really do much with is really difficult. And so what I recommend people do is just throughout the year, as they are gathering seeds or other wildflowers, when you have acorns or from acorns or greenbrier or cattails, those usually produce enough flower where you can actually do something on your own. But generally from seeds, like amaranth and lamb's quarter and curled dock, things like that. Excuse me. I find it's best just to throw all the seeds in a jar, and then once the jar gets full enough, you just grind all that into flour. Just mix all of them together. There's no chemical reactions. There's no, cucumber weed burp. No weird flavors or anything like that. It all just kind of turns into a generic-y nut-flavored flour. So that's really the easiest thing to do, especially if you've roasted the seeds. They will, stay indefinitely. So I really recommend that rather than trying to gather enough seeds to produce a monoculture flower, if you will.
All right, that's it.
Okay. Whoop. Okay, cucumber weed curled dock, dayflower. This is a interesting plant. You'll find it creeping along in flower beds is the most common place, and then also in unmowed areas. It has a very distinctive flower. Whoops. And I screwed up. This particular flower is the dayflower this particular flower is the spiderwort rather than the dayflower. The dayflower, if we go, back one. If you look closely, you'll see that it has two big blue petals. The dayflowers have two big blue petals. The spiderworts have three. I can't do three. I don't have a third hand. But if you're looking at a weird creeping plant with alternating leaves, so they kind of zigzag. I can't do that either. Zigzag along the stem. This is a dayflower. The parts that I like to eat are the very top. So the flower will be at the very tip of the plant. There will be some other unopened flower buds around it because the flowers, they only last 6-7 hours. And then they shrivel up and go away, hence the name day flower, because an individual flower really only lasts a day. But the next day there will be a new, fresh blue flower appearing. So you take that and like the top first section of the leaf, and you can eat it raw. The flowers are fine raw. The leaves sometimes can be a little tough. So you can eat them raw, but a lot of times I'll cook the leaves, like a stew or soup or other ways that I want to hide the food, from my family, sneak it into a dish. I have a lot of this growing in the flower beds out back. So think of it as a spinach substitute, if you will. So the flowers are pretty raw, but then the leaves, lower than that very first fresh leaf at the very top, right by the flower, the leaves are going to be too tough to use. The stem, it's very thin and kind of tough. You can use it, but you got to chop it up really finely. So really just the top flower and the top leaf in your food. Okay, dandelions. Ooh, 8:55. Oh, do we have a question?
Nope, just time.
Okay. Yeah, wow. Another hour almost passed. So dandelions. Do I want to talk about dandelions now or wait until next week? Let's try and squeeze dandelions in here now. So dandelions are amazing. They are considered to be a superfood in that they have vitamins, minerals, and a small amount of protein. It's kind of rare for plants to have protein, so when something does, it's kind of a big deal. Dandelions have that. Edible parts are the leaves, the flower, the root, and if you look at that root, you see there is kind of a white area between the root and where the leaves start turning red and green. That little white segment right there is absolutely the most delicious part of the dandelion. Take that out, cut it just above the brown of the root and just at the base of the red-green, so you have just the white part, and cook that up like an artichoke heart. Like sauteed in some olive oil and some garlic, some butter. Really, really, really good. So the leaves, you can eat them raw when they are really, really young. This again is a bitter green, so as the plant matures, the bitterness increases, and especially once the flower appears, the dandelion flower, then the bitterness really gets strong. So it's best to collect the leaves before the flower has appeared. Like I said, raw, but really going back to the whole bacon grease thing. I'll tell you right now, Sunday mornings before church when we got time, I'll get up really early, cook up some bacon, scramble some eggs, put some dandelion greens if they're available in the bacon grease, and make a big dandelion egg bacon tortilla. Absolutely fantastic. The flowers, let me go back to the flowers here for a second. What you want from the flower are just the yellow petals. So if you look at that flower, you see it has kind of a cream-colored stem, and then that green calyx from which the petals come from. You need to remove that green calyx, that Kermit the Frog collar and the turtleneck sweater around the yellow petals, because that is extremely bitter, and it will add a real strong bitterness to anything you do with it. So, what do you do with the flowers? Well, you can make a tea out of them. You can eat them raw in a salad. You can make dandelion wine. You can make infused vinegar. You can make infused oil to give kind of a dandelion flavored olive oil, but I personally don't recommend that because if you do it wrong, you end up with botulism. So I shy away with that because the infused vinegar is actually really, really good. But the tea and the wine also are fine and raw. So the flowers can use multiple ways. The root is, if you take it up and just kind of chop it up and boil it and make a tea out of it, it has a very nice flavor. But what I like doing, what we grew up doing up in Minnesota, we would take the root, peel it, chop it up into little coffee bean sized pieces, roast those, put them on a cookie sheet, roast them at 400 degrees for just 4 or 5 minutes, just darken them some, and then grind them up like you would grind coffee beans, and then mix that with the coffee that, the store-bought coffee just as an extender. I'll tell you right now, the dandelion root coffee is absolutely fantastic. If you're familiar with the chicory coffee like in New Orleans, that stuff is bad compared to the dandelions. Okay, we have less than a minute left. Again, we've gone through an hour of plants. Again, I'm hoping someone out there is getting, useful information from this. There's so much food available right now in your yard. This is a great time to be foraging. Again, Alternative Houston and Scout and Cellar, the Sliding Alder wines are the sponsors. They make this show available this week. Next week, I got a lady, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, but she sent me money as kind of a good job, keep it up. So that's pretty exciting. At this point, we are now 9 o'clock. So until next week, au revoir, or goodbye. Have a great one. And stop recording. Oh.
Bye.
Bye. All right.